17 years, 7 months, 2 weeks, and 4 days ago, I was a newly ordained priest who showed up at the back door of the rectory of the Cathedral of Christ the King. It was 96 degrees in Cumberland, Wisconsin at my mom and dad's house. On June 28th, it was 42 degrees in Superior, Wisconsin. And there I had left, it was so humid, it was like a jungle back home, and I had this thin t-shirt and shorts and sandals on. And I got to Superior and I grabbed clothing the way you're dressed right now. I grabbed coats on and hats on, and at the back door of the cathedral, the person to greet me was Father Ed Mullimans. And he says, "Andrew, welcome to Superior." And I went, "Okay." And that night he took me out for dinner, and we talked a lot, and there were a lot of life lessons that I didn't know it at the time, but he was giving me. But one of them that came up as we were eating our dinner together was this. We were talking about our priesthood, we were talking about ministry, and he said, "Andrew, as priests, the ministry is in the interruptions." And he went on to talk about how so often our day will be planned. We know what we're going to do. We can read the calendar. That's really nice. And then you wake up, have breakfast, and the phone starts ringing. And this happens, and that happens, and this call comes, and somebody says, "Father, do you have 5 minutes?" And 2 hours later, and then there's a funeral, and then there's an anointing, and then there's an emergency. The ministry is in the interruption. The ministry is going to be how you deal with all the stuff that can come at you left and right and top and down. And I've thought a lot about that because it's so true. For life is in the interruptions. Our spiritual lives are in the interruptions. See, I'm willing to suggest that it's easy to be nice when I am well rested, well fed, have plenty of leisure time. All of my problems come to me in discrete little blocks with ample time in between. And oh, by the way, I've just come back from vacation. Boy, that's easy. I don't know about you, that ain't life. Life is lived in chunks. And suddenly you think you're going to be smooth sailing and something's going on, and all of a sudden, out of left field, comes that phone call at 3 o'clock in the morning. Or that visit to the doctor's office. Or that news from a family member or a friend. Or my body isn't working the way it used to work. Or what's going on with my family? What's going on at work? How did this friendship unravel? Life happens. And in the chaos that so often happens in life, that we find ourselves, how do we find our way? How do we stay true to the path? You see, on the first night of the mission, we talked about finding our way, the signs with the fruits of the Spirit, to make sure that we're going in the right direction, to make sure that when all other things are equal, we know who we are, what we're about, and how we're living. We do this to remind ourselves, quite simply, that we're on the right path, a path that leads to God. But then, on the second night, last night, we said, okay, then how do I get in condition for that? How do I work through that? And we talked about stuff. And is stuff helping or hurting? We talked about people, and are people helping us or hurting us? And we talked about ourselves in terms of our body, our mind, our heart, and our soul. Are we in shape? And how do we use those external measures and those patterns to show if we are, in fact, on that journey with Christ? But tonight, this is kind of, the down and dirty, the messy, the awkward, the hard. This is where we get to the point where we say, okay, here's the deal. There are parts of my life that are either out of my control or just spinning out in all directions. Now what do I do? Now how do I live? Now how do I act? And I'm going to give us 4 words. 4 words to hang 4 thoughts on for how the Christian lives in a changing world. They are attitude, habit, team, God. I'll get into all 4 of them. Our attitude, our habits, who's on our team, and how do we call upon God. I begin with a scripture reading. Many of you have been studying the book of James. And I want to refresh you, for those of you who've been reading it, and I want to share with you for those for whom this may be a new book to look at and explore. This is chapter 1, verses 2 through 4. This is how James starts his letter. My brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of any kind, consider it nothing but joy, because you know that the testing of your faith provides endurance, and let endurance have its full effect, so that you may be mature and complete, lacking in nothing. I have read those words, and I wanted to look up to heaven and say, are you kidding? Trial? Like hard stuff? And the word joy in the same sentence. What are you thinking? And yet James is going to say, yes. Because it's in the testing, it's in the trial, it's in that struggle that we discover who we are, we discover just how strong we are, and we also discover how much farther we have to go. That it's in the testing that we discover who God has made us to be, and are we in fact growing on that path? Kids know it. I don't want a test. But the tests tell us, what does the kid know? It's in the testing we reveal the knowledge one has acquired. It's in that series of trials that we really know just how strong we are. Now, that's the fundamental piece which sets the tone for this first word, attitude. What's my attitude? And I want you to think about this, because of all the things that are outside of our control, I can't tell you what the weather's going to be like tomorrow. I can't tell you what kind of day we're going to have. I can't tell you what kinds of interruptions we're going to have. Here's what I can tell you. We choose our attitude. We choose how we will face the day. Because if somebody says to me, oh, it's going to be terrible, you've just chosen your attitude. And if I say, why do you feel that way? Why are you thinking that way? Well, the weather's bad. What's happened is we have let weather decide the course of our souls. We have let some external drive my heart. We choose our attitude. God gives us the free will to do that. And I want you to think about what those choices entail. First, that means that whether life is going great or literally everything is falling apart, we got to acknowledge where we are on the scale. It's the acknowledgement. Am I having a tough day? We're allowed to have tough days. How will I face it? Am I going to face it like, okay, I know James says it's a trial. All right, Lord, there's a lesson in here. Okay, Lord, you're going to show me something. Okay, Lord, this is a chance to grow. That could be sometimes really hard to embrace. I get that. Because there are days that we confront that are so painful. I get that. But we still choose how are we going to face them. Are we going to square up and say, I'm going to tackle this? I am not going to run away. I'm going to square my shoulders, roll up my sleeves, and dig in. Because, Lord, you're going to walk with me. It's the acknowledgement of where I am that then I can say, now what will I choose, Lord, to face this? Lord, how am I going to act on this? Because, again, it's easy to have a good attitude when everything good is going on in my life. That's not a test of character. The test of character is, how do I act when it's hard? How do I act when there's a lot of momentum that might lead me a different way? Once we've acknowledged that, then it's the actual choice of our will to face it. I'm going to face this. I'm going to deal with this. I'm going to square my shoulders and engage it. But that's could be either good or bad. You see, I can have a good attitude and I can have a bad attitude, because sometimes we engage bad attitudes. And sometimes we say, I have a right to be grumpy. I have a right to be ornery. Really? You have a right to have feelings. We all have feelings. We're allowed to feel sad. We're allowed to feel angry. The question is, what are we going to do with the feeling? The question is, how will I face that feeling? And am I going to make it a positive approach? Because I can choose how I will live the gift of this day. See, my attitude really comes into, Lord, you've given me this day. How will I live it? Lord, you've given me the gift of my life, a sacred, precious, holy gift. Now, what am I going to do with it? What will be the attitude by which I will interact with every soul I see? Will I own it? Will I embrace it for your glory, your honor, your goodness? We choose our attitude. May we choose wisely. But once we've squared away the attitude, the next part that we get into, habit. You see, and this kind of naturally flows from what we talked about last night. The issue of if I'm working on my body, and if I'm working on my mind, if I'm working on my heart, and I'm working on my soul, if I am developing health. A habit is a regular pattern of behavior applied to a specific action. I, on a regular basis, connect work and time together. It's consistent. It's discipline. I do the action regularly in time. It might be a daily behavior, a weekly behavior, a monthly behavior, an annual behavior, but there are disciplines that strengthen our habits. And the question that we want to pursue on this is, do I have discipline? Do I have discipline? Can I see examples in my life that I consistently and regularly apply behaviors to very specific things? Most of us do. And most of us have some pretty good ones in place. I remember my mom, when I was a little boy, teaching me how to brush my teeth. I remember. You start up top, side, back side. I mean, it was like, that's what it means to brush your teeth, Andrew, and you're going to do it in the morning after you've had breakfast, and you're going to do it at night before you go to bed. I mean, it seems funny, but if you brush your teeth, you don't think about it. You just do it because you have your habit. You have the way you brush your teeth. If you have a certain way you get ready in the morning, or you get ready for bed at night, if there's a certain way in which you go about cleaning the house, there's a pattern. If there's a certain way in which you mow the grass, if there's a certain way in which you prepare for a meal, this is how I set the table, this is how I prepare the food, this is how I welcome my guests. We all have these little patterns, and you just look at where they are, because the habit, when it's ingrained, you never notice. Good habits and frankly bad habits, they blind us because they become part of the natural pattern of our lives. I don't consciously think about brushing my teeth. I just brush my teeth. But if I think about it, I do it a certain way. Same thing when you sign your name, your signature. We don't think about it because the minute you think about it, the minute you think about making your name, you'll mess it up. It's routine. It's part of the habit. It's what we do. But you really want to mess it up? Just stop and say, okay, I'm going to make that letter now, and I'm going to make that. Ooh, that's not my... Because it's part of the rhythm of our life. Now, habits, when we look at these, good ones and bad ones, this is a moment of personal honesty. What are my bad habits? What are regular patterns of behavior, but directed towards activities that are destructive? What are bad habits where, certain speech comes out of my mouth, or I'm doing certain behaviors around a computer or the television, or in certain locations I'm tempted, or at certain activities I'm tempted. And I fall into the temptation. It becomes a pattern. a pattern which isn't helping me grow closer to Jesus. The test for a habit is really simple. It's the fruits of the Spirit. Are the habits in my life helping me be more loving and more joyful, more peaceful, more patient, more kind, more good? Do you see where I'm going with this? If the habit in my life is positive, if the habit in my life is constructive, if the habit in my life, just a regular routine, a standard practice of behavior, applied over time, consistently helps me, and look at them this way. Working out, taking exercise. Do I normally catch myself doing a certain amount? It doesn't have to be powerlifting or running laps. I'm talking about just, do I take a certain amount of exercise? Just on a regular basis. How about food? Do I find myself falling into patterns of behavior that aren't good for me? How about alcohol? Anybody that I've worked with who's had a real struggle with drugs or an addiction can find, you can just work it back, that the pattern didn't just spring up overnight. It grew, and you can almost always tease it back to a moment in time where this began this downward slope, and the farther down the hill I got, the faster I got, and the quicker I got caught up in the mess until finally the patterns themselves were running my life. The habits were dictating my life rather than me dictating the habits. But the interesting thing is, what's true for a habit in a negative, destructive way is also true for a positive one. Most people who look physically fit, most people who look like they don't have to exercise, look that way because they exercise. Isn't that interesting? That the people who look like they don't need it, look that way because they have a disciplined habit of doing it. Most of the people who have a really good spiritual life, who look like they don't need to pray, look that way. Why? Because they have a habit of daily prayer, which anchors them and strengthens them and orients them. And people who have good relationships with family and friends, who look like they don't need to work on their relationships, look that way. Why? Because they have a habit of checking in and reaching out and connecting with the people in their lives. It's the habit which proves the fruitfulness of their life. And you can talk about this physically or intellectually or relationally or spiritually. The habits can be strengthened in good ways or unravel and become destruction. So let's talk about how we build the good habit. First, we take small steps. The key of building a good habit is, first off, having it in one-day increments. And then say a week. You ever had this happen? It's the New Year's resolution syndrome. You know, every year on January 1st, I'm going to lose 67 pounds. Right? And I'm going to do it like by Valentine's Day. It's not practical. Come on. Or somebody who says, you know what? I am so going to read the Bible. I'm going to start at Genesis, and I'm going to get going. And they get like through Genesis, and that's pretty good. And somewhere in like after Exodus is okay. And then they get to Leviticus, and they go, what? Who? Huh? And it just grinds to a halt. Or somebody says, you know, I'm really going to work on this relationship. And then something is said, or something happens. Or maybe a word is uttered. Maybe it hits us in a soft spot, and you know what? We don't take that high ground. Instead, we kind of pull back. See, it's when things get hard, when the trial, when the test happens, that's when the habit pushes on us. See, what James says, we should rejoice with the trial. Why? Because that's how we know that we're making forward progress. And my image for this with a habit is, imagine, if you will, that I am a swimmer and I'm swimming in a river that's coming against me. We all live in a beautiful part of the world, and the Brule, beautiful piece of heaven, And in those of you who've been on it, you know what I'm talking about. But in some places, the brule runs real fast. In some places, it barely moves at all. But I want you to imagine you're in this beautiful, pristine water, this beautiful countryside, and you want to be moving upstream. And you're swimming. Now, here's the thing. As long as I keep swimming, I'm going to make forward progress. As long as I'm going against the current. But as long as I keep a stroke, I'm gonna gain ground. What happens the minute I stop? The current takes me back. Now, get the point behind this. As long as I am working, as long as I am striving, as long as I am in a trial, testing, facing the ongoing water coming against me, as long as I'm swimming, I'm going to make progress. The minute I stop, it pulls me back. Most of us, when we're honest, would rather not have a lot of trial, test, and work. That's fair. And so when that happens, what you do is you stop where you are and you get out of the river and you catch your breath. Because note this, if I want an easy life, I'm going to drift my whole life. If I want an easy life, if I want a life that has no effort on my part, I can have that. And I'm going to go all the way downstream. And I don't know where it's going to take me, and I won't have any direction, I won't have any control, but boy, it was easy. Oh, was it easy. Oh my, was that easy. And God help me when I'm out in the middle of Lake Superior. Why? Because I did nothing. Life will push us. The world will lead us. It's our everyday engagement with the stresses and struggles of life that helps us make that forward progress. And you know, the interesting thing is, if you're swimming, you don't really feel it. You're just working. Okay, I'm swimming. It's the effort. It's the constant effort. You don't realize how much progress you've made until you're able to stop and look, wow, holy cow, I've really come a long way. But guess what? The minute I get back in that water again, I'm going to have to keep going. Life, by definition, calls forth effort. By definition. Do we have the habits to keep the effort going? Do we have the habits that say, I'm going to face this trial with joy? My attitude is going to be, Lord, you're just helping me train to become stronger, okay? You're helping me to become more the person you have made me and dreamed me to be, so I'm going to stay in this because I know that with that steady application of habit, with a good attitude, forward progress will be made. We know this. Any real success we've had in life, any real accomplishment that warms our heart, anytime we have seen things that we say, that was well done, that was beautiful, we know it was not easy. We know it didn't happen by accident. We know it didn't happen because we just floated along for the ride. It happened because every moment we were in the stream swimming against the current. And we know the effort it took. We know the hard work and the planning, the discipline it took to get to this spot. What will tomorrow bring? What will the day after that, and the month after that, and the year after that bring? Because all we have to do if we want to take it easy, we can float. We can float. Floating's easy. Floating, drifting, will take away all of our control, all of our direction, all of our input. And it will lead us. And sometimes it will lead us to places we shouldn't go. It's really interesting because, when I was growing up as a kid, my dad, talk about habits, used to say, son, who are you running with? We're going to get to this when we talk about the team. Because sometimes we can be in good groups, doing good things, because the group will lead us and help us. But that's assuming we're in a good group. Sometimes we're doing good work because we're in a good work environment. Or sometimes, we're a good neighbor because we're in a good neighborhood. Or sometimes we're doing really well academically because we're surrounded by great teachers and supportive students. And sometimes we might be able to say, wow, I really got a lot accomplished, but I didn't realize that there was a whole supporting cast around me that was helping me. If we take away all the other stuff, the question is, Lord, what was my attitude in this? What were my habits in this? Because when the storms of life, when that current gets stronger, when challenges come, have I created that ongoing discipline to say, I'm going to hang in there. I'm going to treat this with joy. I'm going to square my shoulders. I'm going to continue on. I'm not going to give up. Lord, you're going to help me even though I know it's hard. Attitude reinforces habits. And the stronger our habits, the more power we have behind our attitude. Start small. But as we start small, what we will find is that the muscles of our will, the muscles on the inside to hang in there, they grow, they get stronger. Just like our physical bodies get stronger under stress. You go to the gym for the first time and you try to lift these weights and you go home and you go, oh my gosh. Oh. But then the minute we start doing that for a couple weeks, we go, hey, there's something there. Hey, I feel better. I'm lifting weights that I could have never even touched when I started. I'm stronger because I've been working. What's true for the body is true for the soul. Now, the third thing, team. I started to touch on it, but I want to get to it in terms of a practical point. Who's on my team? If I'm going, I grew up in high school and I played football. And our coach used to say, hey, we don't win as individuals, we win as a team. Well, interestingly enough, it ain't just true for football. When the storms and challenges of life come, when changes happen, when trials come, who are the people that we lean on? I need you to think for a moment. Now, this is kind of part of what we talked about the last couple of nights, but for a moment, the question is, who's on my team? Who stands with me when I'm struggling? Who do I pick up the phone and call? Who do I email? Who do I say, can we talk? Who's on my team? Who are the people I rely on? I count on? I need? Because they know me? Because they love me? Because I trust them? Who's on my team? And then interestingly enough, if you really want to think something through, whose teams are you on? In other words, who's calling you when they're having a hard time? Who says, boy, I need your help on this. Can you walk with me? I'm struggling with this. Can you help me? I want you to note this, because if we're going to talk about that we need each other, the line, of course, is united we stand, divided we fall apart. Because if people start saying, I don't have a big team, it doesn't have to be a big team. Do you got a team? See, some teams, it's like, those 3-person volleyball teams, those sand volleyball, they only got 3 people on them, but boy, can they play volleyball. And, basketball, they got 5 on the team. And football, they got 11. And if you're a marching band, there might be 200 on the team. I'm not caring about how big or small the team is. I want to know, are there people there? And do we call on them? The reason why this is so important, so spiritually critical, is this. United we stand, divided we die. It happens this way. The people in my life that I love and need the most, when I'm under stress, it's a very common occurrence that we tend to push away from the very people we're closest to. Think about this. Sometimes when I'm hurting and a friend says, hey, how you doing? No, really, how you doing? What's my first instinctive reaction sometimes? Well, I'm okay. Liar! Think about this. This is somebody who loves me. This is somebody who cares. This is somebody who's taking the time to ask because they think that, I like you and you're important to me. And if I push them away, Think about it. I am cutting myself off from the very person whose help can strengthen me. This is deceptive. If you only remember one thing I say tonight, remember this: united we stand. And so it's so easy in our relationships to start to put barriers between the very people who know us best. And all you need for proof of this is to attend the funeral of somebody who's taken their life, who thought that they had no one in their life. That's probably the most extreme example. But I unfortunately see it enough to say, united we stand, so we better stand together. Because whenever, brothers and sisters, we see isolation, whenever we see that pattern emerge, big red lights and loud foghorns better be going off. Because if we recognize that we are only as strong as the people around us who shore us up and walk with us and unite with us, if that's the strength that we have, then the minute I start carving those people away, I am so vulnerable, ripe for the picking. The devil rubs his hands in glee because we are that weak and we are that vulnerable. Who is on my team? Am I talking to him? Am I connecting with him? Am I building and encouraging and fostering those relationships? Am I strengthening the bonds between the people that God has put within my life to bless my life and so that I can be a blessing to them? Am I working at building up the team? Because you know what? You don't win as an individual. You win as a team. Jesus sent them out in pairs. I love that. And whenever he needed, he'd call them all together. United we stand. The team piece. We select these people. We're all born into families. I understand that. But I've now been in this parish long enough where I can honestly say, friends, I love you. In so many cases, I've been privileged to be parts of your story. In so many cases, I know that nobody has a perfect life. That all of us have struggles and crosses. All of us carry some pretty big wounds. All of us have fought big battles. Or we're going to be facing big battles. That every soul that we encounter has certain strengths and certain sorrows. We need each other. Anybody who thinks differently is lying. United we stand. United we grow. United we become more and more fully the person God has made us to be. And united we can face whatever this world dishes up. Why? Because there are these people who will give us that perspective to help us find our way. God did not make the man to be alone. But then God didn't make the couple to be alone. And God did not make humanity to be alone. United we stand. In this venue, I would submit this. When we see patterns of isolation, be warned. Be on our guard. And when we are tempted to pull back, maybe that's the very time where we better start pulling toward. That in those moments when we have that, because this isn't holy, in those very moments when we are tempted to isolate and withdraw and extend back away and put up walls and put up barriers, all we're doing is boxing ourselves in. Who wins? Anybody on this rock? But when we see efforts to say, you are my sister, and you are my brother, and you are my neighbor, and you are my friend, and I'm going to work at this. I'm going to grow at this. I'm going to make this relationship better. Whenever we see the attempt to take a connection between two souls and make it stronger, that's a success. And whenever we see that in a family, whenever we see that in a team, whenever we see that in a church or in a community, those are concrete signs of success. Those are attitudes working with habits to build community. That's a gift. That's a blessing, and that will be there so that when the storms of life come, we have a strength. We can lean. You see it in a wheat field. You take a stalk of wheat by itself. Heck, a little kid can blow it over. But when you have a whole wheat field and that wind blows, they just all lean on each other. They might bend, but they don't break. Why? Because they're supported. They're holding each other up. United we stand. Our attitudes, our habits, our team, and then God. Come to me, all you who weary and labor. I will give you rest. And not only do we lean on each other, we have something much stronger we can lean on. We have something much stronger that we can brace up against. We have someone who made us out of love, died for us out of love, and who longs for us to be united in love. Isn't it interesting that so often we can find ourselves praying when life is hard, but maybe we weren't praying when life was good? Isn't that interesting? Isn't it interesting that unless we have a habit of building our relationship team with God every day, we can find ourselves only saying, Lord, I'll follow you, I'll give up my life, I'll even become a priest, if you would just take care of this. That's not the way it works. You see, for us to face the storms of life, do we have that habit of prayer? And this is where, what we mentioned yesterday, our spiritual life, cultivating our soul, our spiritual health. Brothers and sisters, a little bit of prayer every day builds a foundation within us to handle the storms and struggles of life. It's the daily prayer that then is tied to Sunday Eucharist, that's tied to a community of believers who support us and pray for us and who we support and pray for. My individual daily prayer, the nourishment of the sacraments, the support of fellowship is all part of my spiritual life, so that when the struggle comes, I can call to God. And I can, like St. Peter, sinking in the water, Lord, save me. And the Lord is right there. He's right there to help him out. Our struggles and our challenges are real. They're so real. But I will submit this. If we're not praying every day, we're blind. Like I am right now without my glasses on. By taking out these glasses, you are a blur of color. I would not know who you are just from this. I would just know there are people in the room. And I know people who have even far worse, vision than I do for distance. It's just like it's a haze. Daily prayer improves our vision. Because the more time we spend fostering our relationship with God, the more we see in a godly manner. The more we are able to see the face of Jesus, the more quickly we can respond to an act of grace, the more sensitive we are to responding not to what's on the exterior, but what's in the heart. You know this with people you really love. You can just tell if they're in a good place or a bad place. But when we cultivate a spiritual life, we see spiritually. And we become more and more sensitized and aware of what's going on around us, so that we can respond to it as Christ would respond to it. We become more able then to adapt and adjust when life changes. Because when life changes suddenly, when there's stress for the Christian, when everything gets turned upside down, the only compass we have is Jesus. You say, okay, Lord, I thought I was going that way, but okay. It looks like there's supposed to be a wall there, but I'm going to keep going this way because that's the path. Oh, it's not a wall. It was a temptation. Oh, okay. Or, okay, Lord, Gulp. I know that I've got to go that way, and I'm not sure how I'm going to get there yet, but I'm going to go and hope that you're going to open doors and open windows and make a path. To summarize all of this, life happens, and the content, the richness, and the beauty of our lives will be revealed by how we adjust and adapt to the changing circumstances that life presents. It's easy to be nice when everything is nice. That doesn't happen very often. The test of our character that we embrace with joy is when we recognize with our attitude, strengthened by habits, surrounded by a team, calling upon God's help to face whatever is in front of us today with strength, with grace, with love. To do that, I would merely give you these words that come from St. Paul from the Philippians. This is chapter 1, verses 27 through 30. Brothers and sisters, live your life in a manner worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent and hear about you, I will know that you are standing firm in one spirit, striving side by side with one for the faith of the gospel. And you are in no way intimidated by your opponents. For them, this is evidence of their destruction, but of your salvation. This is God's doing. For He has graciously granted you the privilege not only of believing in Christ, but of suffering for Him as well, since you are having the same struggles that you saw that I had, and now hear that I still have. We look at the cross and know that the Lord understands struggle, trial, testing. And if Jesus was victorious and triumphant through His cross, He's going to help us with ours. He's going to help us carry whatever we need to carry. Our part in this is to be mindful and choose what our attitude will be. To do our part to develop the habits that are guided by the fruits of the Spirit. To surround ourselves with a team who honestly love and care for us, who will call us and call on us into accountability where we need to. And whenever we lean on the Lord and cultivate our relationship with Him, so that when we encounter the challenges, when we're swimming upstream, we do it with strength. We do it with God's help. And we do it with joy. Just as James said, a joy in the face of trials. God bless you all.